Okay. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Liz Crocker, and welcome to RBCM Outside, the hidden history of Esquimalt Teahouse. So I am here today at Gorge Esquimalt Park, and we're going to be looking at the hidden history of the tea house that used to live here. But before we get started, I want to acknowledge that here in Esquimalt, we're on the territory of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations, also known as the Lekwungen-speaking people. And especially on a day like this, I'm reminded of how amazing it is that I get to live in a place like this. And this is an extraordinary, beautiful park if you've never been here. And so you're going to get to see a little bit of that park and a little section of the park. And if you've not joined us before, this is webinar format and we do record it and we'll post it to our YouTube channel afterwards. So you can share it or have a look at it afterwards again, if you like. And the next programs that we have coming up, we do these every second Thursday starting at noon. And the two that we have happening in June are all about orcas. It's Orcas Month in June. And on June 3rd, I'm going to be with Mark Learin Young, who is an author and actually wrote the exhibition text for the orcas exhibit that's on right now at the Royal BC Museum. If you can get down and see it, it's amazing. That's June 3rd. And then on June 17th, I'll be out at Sydney at the center at Sydney, BC, at the Center for the Salish Sea with Tina Kelly. And we're going to be whale watching from land out in Sydney. So join us for those programs. But today I'm really happy that my guest is here with me. Michael Abe is project manager for Landscapes of Injustice project. And he's able to be with us here today on the site of where this tea house and the different features in the landscape used to be, and there's still some remaining. And he knows a lot about this history, not everything, as nobody can know everything, but he knows quite a bit about it and about some of the developments that are happening here on this site as well. So I'm just really excited to have Michael here with me. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and we're going to leave time at the end for questions, and we're going to move away from the construction very soon as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Michael, and I'll let him follow up on that introduction. If you want to add anything, Michael, you go ahead. I'm going to pop my mask back on, and you can take mine off? You can take yours off. There we go. Because we're outside. We're outside.
Okay. I'll take my glasses off. Hi, Liz. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about the Esquimalt Gorge Park and a bit of the history. I'm going to turn around there.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, and as you can see, there's a little bit of construction going on here, but I'll talk a little bit about that later. But just to put things into perspective, let's go back to the 1800s with the invention of the incandescent light bulb. And by 1897, Victoria was a very modern city by Canada standards, and a lot of the houses, better off homes, had electricity. In fact, the legislature building in downtown was lit with illuminated lights on June 21st to commemorate the Diamond Jubilee of Queen Victoria. And as we know, they're still lit every evening, all 3,330 of them. But that same year in 1897, the BC Railway Company was formed, and it was managed by Frank Bernard, who later became Premier of BC. But the company, they were building tram lines to get people around Victoria so that they didn't have to use these horse and carriages, horse and buggies, and they didn't need buy one of these newfangled horseless carriages, the car. And so they were expanding their tram lines. And in 1904, with the housing construction along the Gorge Waterway, they extended the tram line up from Esquimalt Road, up Gorge, and up Craigflower. And in 1905, they bought these 20 acres from the Hudson's Bay Company to form a park. So later that year, they cleared 10 of those acres, and they extended the tram to the top of the park. And there's a little roundabout, and the Tramway Gorge Park was formed. It was July 1905. It was built, and it was sort of like a living, pulsating advertisement for the new electrical age. They had 2 trams that came from downtown every 20 minutes. They each held 100 people, and they would go from the downtown area, Government and Yates, and come up to this tram loop, the Gorge Loop, for 5-cent fare. And so they would come down this walkway along the Gorge Waterway, tour around this area. So if you can imagine the early 1900s, this area, it would have been bustling with this amusement park, this Tramway Gorge Park. They put up these canvas sheets and they showed outdoor movies. They built a roller coaster, the Scenic Railway roller coaster. They had a water slide called Shoot the Chute that went in there. They had circuses, they had vaudeville acts, they had hot air balloon flights, they had high diving acts. It was just a myriad of activity here. They had a merry-go-round and a dance pavilion and even a roller rink. So it was a bustling area of activity. And they had this change facility called the Pay, just down there, because the water was very warm and inviting for those who love to swim. And just back past the reversing falls, past the Gorge Bridge, there was a free change facility called the Free. So we had the Free and the Pay. And just down past there, in 1909, a Japanese boat builder and entrepreneur, Zenkichi Nishimoto, he built a boat 40 feet long and 10 feet wide. And he had it docked down there. They had a floating tea house decorated with cherry blossoms and paper lanterns. And then people would go over this red lacquered bridge onto the boat, and there was tables, and they would sit and they would have refreshments and ice cream. And they would, for 10 cents, they could go up the gorge on a tour, a boat tour, to the Craigflower Bridge and back again, and all the while enjoying the scenery, the refreshments, and the entertainment from this piano, the small piano. But we'll talk a little bit more about that piano later. So let's just go up a little bit into the park.
That is so interesting that it was so active.
Oh, it was like thousands of people. So a Japanese fellow, Yoshitaro, or Joe Kishida, he noticed all this activity and he saw an opportunity. So he was inspired by the expo in San Francisco and the popularity of their tea gardens. And so he got together with Hayato, or Harry Takata, and 4 other businessmen, and they put together $5,000, and they pitched this idea to the manager of the Tramway Gorge Park. And they were given 1 acre. So we just entered from down there. There was an arched torii or torii gate, and you would come up, because it did go down to the water. You would come up around this area and enter the park, and there were ponds, and there were all sorts. It's very in Japanese decor. So Joe Kishida, in April of 1907, he called for his father, Isaburo Kishida. And he was a garden designer in Japan at the Yokohama Nursery. And he was 65 years old. And in April 1907, he came. And they imported all these Japanese trees, these bonsai trees. And in 3 months, they transformed their 1 acre into a Japanese garden. Now, you probably know Isaburo Kishida. In 1910, he went back to Japan, but not before leaving his legacy. He designed the first garden, the Japanese garden, in the Butcher Gardens for Jenny Butcher.
Oh.
And also Laura Dunsmuir, her James Dunsmuir was a premier of BC, and it's the Japanese gardens at the Hatley Castle, the Royal Roads University. So anyways, they opened the Japanese garden in in July 1907 to great fanfare. There was about 780 people the first day, and by the weekend there was thousands of people. It was a real success, a resounding success. And in fact, there was an article from the Victoria Daily Colonist in 1907, just after they opened, and I'll read: "Man and nature have gone hand in hand in the transformation of the gorge from an unkept forest to a magnificent park. In the midst of all this charming scene is a miniature Japan transported from the Orient, enclosed by typical bamboo and board callings. Within are found many evidences of Japanese life, a Japanese pavilion where tea and cake from the empire of the Mikado is served to the curious and the adventurous. Curios from the Orient are on sale, and near at hand is a Japanese maze that affords rare amusement to the rashly daring who would venture within its gates." Very poetic, but in reality, this Japanese garden this whole park was more like a North American amusement park. And you see now that they have this story here, arched gate. And I'm just going to stop here for a second and sort of use this to orient where we are in the original garden, because none of this is original. Hardly any of this is original. We're probably about the midway here. And so it goes down to just before the path by the Gorge Waterway. And over there, it would go past that road that goes alongside the garden itself. This maintenance shed over here would have been a plant nursery, and beyond it, an apiary. And, oh no, not an apiary, an aviary. We didn't want these, we want the birds. And just past that was that maze he talked about. It would be a bamboo grove that's carved into a maze, and people could find their way through it. And so, and straight up there would be, if we look straight up the hill, through the trees, you would have been able to see the main tea house. So let's just go up there now. So in this area here, you would have had wisteria trellises and small tea pavilions and benches and tables, and people could bring their own picnic and have a picnic here. And over on the right side, where we're showing on the camera, there was more open space over there for more picnickers. And in the center, there was ponds with stone lanterns and goldfish and mandarin ducks. Maybe we'll see our duck here.
There were ducks when we arrived.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get to see some ducks.
Now we're up at the top of near the top of the garden, but the author of our book, Gateway to Promise, Gordon and Lee, I was talking to them yesterday, and he said that he figures that the top of the garden was all the way to about halfway through these Japanese cherry trees. So if you can see these 15 cherry trees, they were donated in 1995 by the Takata Garden Society. And about halfway, there's a little plaque that signifies that and the species of the trees. And so if you imagine that that's where the main tea house was. And
I'll just add, we're facing Tillicum Road. That's what that's Tillicum Road beyond those trees there.
Yeah, and this road here, this driveway wouldn't have been there at the time. And at the very top of that is that tram loop. I'm not sure if she's been showing any slides.
Yes, they've been coming in nice and clear.
Okay, because there's one of those cherry blossoms in bloom in April.
Okay.
But if we just take this, we use this spot here to orient ourselves. So the main tea house was up there. And even though the landscaping was very Japanese, the cuisine was very English fare. It really catered to the Canadian taste. So they had tea, coffee, milk, you had sandwiches. And one of the favorites, for example, was poached eggs on toast, which they called Two Men in a Boat. And the waiters wore like white tie and white jackets and tie. And yeah, it was very It was a very Canadian fair. They really knew how to cater to their clientele, but still with this using the beauty of the gorge and the landscaping of the Japanese garden. That was neat. Okay, so if you were to look on the left, there was we have a few more historical photos in the slides, I think. So on the left, there was a bandstand for music, entertainment. On the right of the tea house would have been for private dinner parties, a small dance floor with a gramophone. And to the right of that was bonsai displays. Oh, you ready there?
Yeah.
Bonsai displays. And to the right of that, there was a building, the Japanese ball game building. So this ball game was very popular, especially with the children. So for 10 cents, you would get these 6 wooden balls and you would roll them down an alley, and there would be 9 holes, red and black holes, and each of them had a different point value. So think about when you go to the exhibition or the fair and you're playing skee ball. So it's not like that, except without the ramp. And you would get coupons for points for all the points you accumulated. You would get coupons, and you could trade those in for prizes. And the prizes were anything from pop guns to fans, or the more coveted Japanese dolls or tea sets, or even the bonsai, because you could accumulate these all summer and then trade them up for bigger prizes. And all of these prizes were of Japanese origin and design. So they brought them in from Japan. So it was a real a garden to be enjoyed by all. And then in 1925 there was a fire that burnt down the bandstand down below and the concession, and a few years later the Fielding's concession stand had a fire. The merry-go-round was torn down, and then the scenic railway roller coaster, which went along that side of the garden, that was condemned. And a few years later, the shoot the chute water slide into the gorge was closed. So this sort of marked the beginning of the end of the park. Of course, the depression was a main factor, but also pollution in the gorge and the popularity of that horseless carriage, the car, was taking over, and so it was sort of on its downswing. And even in the Japanese garden, it was felt, and the Takata family had to let a lot of their family go. I'm not the family, the workers, and it was only run by the family. Yeah, just incidentally, so Joe Kishida in 1922 returned to Japan, and he sold his share to Kensuke Takata, who is Harry's younger brother. And Kensuke had come back in the early 1900s and was in fishing and logging up in Rivers Inlet. But he came down, he had an injury, so he came down and he lived in Victoria with his brother. And then in 1918, he went back to Japan, got married, came back, and then they had started having children. And they all grew up in this working and living in the garden. So for 35 years, this garden really did give the Takatas a really great life. They were able to do very well for themselves, but that all came to a halt with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and Hong Kong in December 1941. And so when the Japanese Canadians were uprooted, including the Takatas, they were one of 273 men, women, children who were put on a CPR steamship out of Victoria Harbor, and they were moved to Hastings Park in Vancouver, the detainment center, where they spent 5 months, very unsanitary conditions. And then they were sent to internment camps. And for the Takata family, they went to Sandon, an abandoned silver mine deep in the Kootenay Rockies in the Slocan Valley. So
And Jenny will share a link because one of the Takata's great grandsons has recently moved back to Victoria,
Yeah.
Dylan Takata. And yeah, there's a recent documentary. I think there's a link for that, Jenny, and also an article that Dylan has written. Yeah, so she'll
Yeah.
share those in the chat.
That's great, because when we come back to, we'll loop back to Dylan and his family. So what you see here is this is all new. And if you see this behind, we'll swing around one more time. This gate was built and dedicated in 2009. And since then, the municipality of Esquimalt has been really doing wonderful work to beautify this area with Japanese and native plants. They're not trying to copy, and they shouldn't be, and that's great, what existed here before, but it really does give you this nice ambiance of a Japanese garden.
I can hear some ducks. They're back.
Oh, that's good.
Oh.
So really nothing was remained, except at the very top of that road. I mentioned that the roundabout for the tram loop was still there. Some of these original pines and Douglas firs are here, and from the transformer boxes and some of the wires that sent electricity down into the amusement park could be seen, or they would have been up on those two remaining tall pine trees there. But in 1995, the Takata Japanese Garden Society put this memorial, and it says, in 1907, Joe Kishida and Harry Takata built a Japanese garden and tea house on this site. It remained a popular attraction until 1942. Many longtime Victoria residents have fond memories of joyful visits to the garden, which occupied the space in more innocent times. So we're almost there?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time to go through the garden that has been created and how beautiful it is. There's ponds and stone lanterns, little waterfalls.
And I'm just gonna say, with the tech issues we had at the beginning, it seems to have drained my battery quite a bit. I apologize. So if you wanna just wrap up, but we'll keep going as long as we can, but get in what you really want to get across, just in case.
Okay, let's talk while we walk. I know
Yep.
it's not ideal.
Yep, I'll stay close.
So we'll do it very briefly. So unlike the Japanese Americans, the Japanese Canadians had all of their properties forcibly sold, and they weren't allowed to return to the West Coast until 1949. So the Takatas didn't know what was going to happen to their property. They knew that it was getting vandalized, and the property was the garden was being broken into, and yeah, they didn't know. They hired the Stancils, caretakers, to take care of it, but even they couldn't stop the continued destruction. So after the war, the Japanese Canadians were told to either go east of the Rockies or back to Japan. Some had never even been to Japan. And for the Takatas, they went to Toronto. And there's a slide there you might show where Toshie is trying to plead that to get her piano back. So this is that piano that was on the boat. So in 1920, when Zenkichi Nishimoto closed up his business, he wanted to focus on farming and boat building. So he had a property in the Telecom area, and he took the piano there. But in 1938, he went to Vancouver, and so he gave the piano to the Takata family, and in particular, Toshie Takata. And so these letters that we found from Landscapes of Justice just really accentuate the turmoil that she had in trying to either get the piano back, or as what we'll see later in some of the letters, she ends up saying she will sell it to the Stancils, because as much as she doesn't want to sell it, it's the only way, and if she knows who's going to own it, she'll feel better about it. So there's some letters later there. And so that's what happened to the piano for now. Let me do this way. Fast forward to 2018, and the Esquimalt, they're going to put in a wastewater treatment center at McLaughlin Point, and so they're giving some money by what they call the McLaughlin Amenity Funds. And they asked the public what they would like the money spent on. And so the Victoria Nikkei Cultural Society and they started a campaign to have a commemorative tea house built in the site, and it went through a number of voting with the public. Well, actually more so. It will be a multi-purpose building with very much Japanese design and elements. But also very important is that the front display wall will have interpretive imagery and panels to explain about this history. And so research from the Landscapes of Injustice and then Victoria Nikkei Cultural Society and Dylan Takata and his family we're all working together with the Esquimalt municipality, the mayor and council, and the Parks and Rec to make sure that that story is told properly and accurately. So it's been really a great partnership, and we're really looking forward to that building being completed in they say by Christmas, so that's really great.
By Christmas 2021.
This year,
that's
yeah.
so exciting.
And you'll see that there'll be Japanese features, there'll be a torii gate, a water feature, bridges going in, all these big BC wood beams. There'll be a 150-seat event hall on the top floor, and then conference rooms on the second floor, on the first floor, a boardroom. So it'll be a real asset to the municipality, and it'll also give more context to this garden that existed before, and now can be enjoyed. So when we started this campaign, we got an email from somebody, Stephen Lennon, in 2018, and he writes, and I'll read this: "My name is Stephen Lennon, and I've lived in Victoria all my life, as did my parents and grandparents. I read with interest the article in the Times Colonist on April 14th, and believe that I have the piano that was at the gardens during the war. As a child, I was told that the caretakers were friends of my grandparents, Ernest and Muriel Stancil. They sold it to my grandparents when the original owners at the gardens were interned during the war. Over time, it came into my possession. I've had it for 41 years. Well, prior to this, my parents and grandparents had it in theirs. I would like to donate it to the society if there's an interest in having it." So as we brainstorm on ways that we can tell this story within that building, I think it would be really great to either have that piano restored and on display with an interpretive panel, either in the front or on the somewhere in the building. And since we broke this story, and this is very new, a Japanese Canadian musician in Toronto said, "Oh, she heard this story. I would love to compose a song." And then a Japanese Canadian contemporary dancer, she said, and I would take that piece and I would make it into an interpretive dance to tell the story.
Oh my gosh.
So this story is just
wow.
Snowballing.
Wow. That is so significant.
Okay, so let's just finish. your battery by
Um,
some scenes.
well, we're gonna walk. You lead me where you want to
Okay,
go.
sure.
And Jenny, this is if we have enough battery left, we can maybe ask Steve, Michael a couple questions.
Yeah, for sure. There has been just one question is from Holly. Was the ball game an authentic Japanese game or was it a Western invention?
It was Western. It's almost like, think of skee ball at the fair, where you roll these balls up and you go up a ramp and they have these circles. So it's I don't know of anything in Japan that's similar to it.
Good question.
Yeah.
So we're just
again, everything was very North American.
right. Some lovely little waterways here.
Yeah.
There is another question that is, where is the plaque referring to the location of the former homes of Japanese in Victoria? So there was, I believe there was a
Yes.
slide I shared about that.
City Hall, Centennial Square and City Hall. They had a reunion, a 50-year reunion, and a number of Japanese Canadians came back, and Yon Shimizu spearheaded that to get that plaque put in there. So if you go downtown Victoria, Centennial Square, you'll find it.
And I see someone asked where we are. So we are in the Esquimalt Gorge Park in the Japanese garden.
Just off Tillicombe between Gorge and Cragflower, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
We
Any
have-
other questions?
Yeah, we have another question is, does the Takata Garden Society still exist today? And are they involved in the building of the pavilion?
The first part is, I don't know, but they were fairly active in the past, and they built a Takata Gardens at the Horticultural Center of the Pacific, which is just north of us on the Sandwich Peninsula. And I know some of the founding members are fairly elderly, and I don't think that society exists right now. And so that leads to the second point is they haven't been involved in this reiteration of the tea house or the multi-purpose pavilion.
Right.
Thank
So
you for
one
your
more
answer.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any pillings or other parts left of the water slide or any other water features?
No, just past around the corner, I think they had dredged the swimming area to create a slough, but there's structure-wise, there's nothing remaining.
Yeah, I had no idea that was there. Very interesting. Thank you so much, Michael. I think we better end it there. Okay. I apologize for those tech issues that we had at the beginning of the program. Yeah, just again, thank you so much for sharing those stories. It is just to be here in this space with you, to be physically here with you is amazing. And I hope some of that could translate through the digital space, and it's just really just to have your knowledge and your perspective on this space that we might otherwise not know about the history and just take this space for granted. And it's really a very special place. So if you stay where you are, I'll flip my camera around and we'll just say goodbye to everyone. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe. And thanks for joining us. We'll put the recording up on YouTube. Any further questions for Michael, you can send them to us and we'll forward them on to him. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.